Hit the record button.
Wonderful. I am going to paste the agenda into the chat room quickly so anyone dialing in can see. Sorry, there's not little bullets there. I just kind of copied and pasted it. All right, welcome everyone to Lettering Tips Tuesday, Be Fine with the Fine Ones and Other Round Nibs. Wanted to invite you for a summer of lettering. There will be free lettering classes all summer long. If you don't already subscribe to my email newsletter, please do so at letslettertogether.com and you'll get the invitation every week about an hour before we begin. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Please tell us where you are dialing in from in the chat room so that we know that you're here, and please feel free to use the chat room to both ask questions, and if you have a burning question, definitely feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead and ask, because I'd love to be able to answer. Sometimes I have my head down and I'm not always looking. So today we're going to talk about Be Fine with the Fine Ones. And in front of you, if you can, I'll pin my video here. I'll go back and forth at pinning videos. You're going to see a couple of markers here. And this marker up here, I'm curious if anybody has a marker like this. It has a dark gray matte finish and a bullet nib. This was one of the very first markers that I purchased from Neuland when I first began my work this would have been 8 or 9 years ago that I purchased this marker. And it's when they used to have bullet nibs in all the colors. So if you have one, put it in the chat room that you do, because I found it the other day when I was cleaning up my studio, and it was like, wow, that was one of the very first ones that I had. Also, what I have here is the #1 outliner round nib, and then the fine one round nib, and the fine one also comes in a brush nib. We're not really going to talk about those today. We'll talk about that when we talk about brush lettering in a few weeks. And then the outliner, which is also another round nib, and this also comes in the brush nib as well.
Hey Heather, are we supposed to be seeing these as you talk about them?
Yeah, am I not pinned?
Don't see it.
Oh no, it says that I'm pinned on my side. You might have to hit gallery view.
I had to hit pin on my individual screen and that made it larger. If you go up to the small icon and if you hover your mouse over the small icon, you should be able to individually click pin.
And is it bigger now for those of you that aren't on that? Because I hit spotlight video.
Got it now, thank you.
Okay, hopefully everybody can see this. So yes, so I was just going over the very first round nib marker that I purchased, the outliner round nib #1, the 2 fine ones, which are the smaller ones, and then we have the sketch one, which comes in 4 different sizes, going from 0.01, 03, 05, and 07. And the reason why I'm covering this today is not so much because it's round, but because it makes a monoline, which means it makes a line that never varies. It stays the same all the time. And then you may also purchase round nib empty markers and put whatever ink, including ink that you mix up. In this case, this is Alpine Lavender. If you're interested in learning how to mix colors, I have a video about that on YouTube. I've actually got 2 videos about that on how to mix colors, including downloads of how to download worksheets on how to mix colors. So you can check those out as well. And so just want to give you just a quick overview of the marker nibs that we have and the anatomy of a marker nib. So if you've taken my online courses, chances are you've seen me talk about the anatomy of a marker nib. I also have this in my upcoming book. And I go through all the different marker nibs. But this one in particular, this is the round nib. So what that means is that this area at the top, both at the tip, and it is called the tip of the nib, and this whole area over here is considered the nib, you are able to use this entire area no matter which way your marker is faced. So if I'm holding my marker with my thumb and my forefinger, and if I flip it over, you might notice there might be a slight variation, but that's because I've put a dent in my marker from using it for so long in this orientation. Bullet nib markers are wonderful for people who are round nib markers, that's what Neuland calls them. They're also known as bullet nib, are wonderful for people who are just starting out because they don't have that that variation of line that they have to deal with. However, the line has to be pretty precise. So I'd love to turn this over to my friends Amy and Tina to talk about how they use the round nib and why.
Cool.
So I'm going to.
Well, as a lot of people know, Amy and I are both fans of the round nib. But for me, some of just like the high points of why I love the round nib, it's easy and it's accessible. So if you're a beginner and you grab a round nib marker, you're ready to go. You can just start right away. I've been in so many meetings and presentations where folks have a chisel tip style marker and they're scribbling and it's like impossible to read. This, like, anyone can grab and be ready to go. So it's super accessible. You don't have to hold it in a certain way. So for me, it's just really easy, but it's also very consistent. Like, you can just keep writing. It doesn't have to, adjust the angle for the thicknesses. So I get a consistent line every time I use it. And the other thing is, I love that it has the different thicknesses that Heather pointed out, from, the number 1 to the fine 1 to the sketch ones. So if you create a certain hand or you've mastered a certain hand, you can use it large on the wall, but you can also use it to sketch note, that it transfers really easily from big to small. And I'll give a shout out to the Lettering with the Masters course that happened last year. And Carol DuBosch offered an example of Uncial using the round nib. And then Sharon Zeugin also did a great example of italic. So those were just beautiful styles. They were easy to do with a monoline. And for me, I just like that it's reliable. I'm trying to make friends with the other styles. But for me, it's a trick of how my hand is angled. And if I'm stressed in a job and I'm writing rapidly, the round nib is kind of my go-to. So Amy, why don't you share, if you want, what some of your highlights are too?
Thank you so much, Tina. And I just want to give a shout out both to Tina and Amy. They were very early adopters in my lettering classes over 2 years, well, a little bit, a year and a half ago. They've been lettering with me, and I'm happy to call them my friends as well. So, Amy, what do you have to say?
I don't know that I have a lot to add, other than one of my favorite hands is architect's hand, and bullet nib or a round nib is just perfect for that. And I just maybe want to talk a little bit about how I've built out my marker palette with I do a couple things to make it really easy to find them, because I use the brush nibs and the round nibs quite a bit. So I mark all my round nibs with an O on the end, just so that when they're all mixed up, I can find them easier.
That's great.
I also make colored ones, and then I'll paint the end with an acrylic marker so that I know what color it is. And if I don't have the right color marker, I'll take a little piece of paper. This is actually a piece of paper that a label that I colored on and stuck it on, and then I just stick a hole in to refill.
Awesome. So, that's a great hack.
Yeah, so I end up using these quite a bit. And then I've also found I'll fill empty fine ones with different colors also. And same thing in terms of coloring on the nib, the end of the nib. And if I have some bigger round nib markers that aren't Noyland that I can show if you want to. So there's something called a crank. I don't even know how to say it.
So it's a mop, right? And it's made by
a graffiti marker. And God, I just had it here a second ago. Where'd it go? Here it is. You can buy it empty or with ink, and it's essentially a round nib. It's just big and round.
And the end of it's kind of fuzzy, sort of like a bingo dauber kind of thing.
Yeah, so you get it, it gets really big. And then there's a bunch of acrylic markers that have round nibs. here's one where I just hacked off the top of it so it was bigger. This is what it's supposed to look like. This is what it looks like if you just shave.
So you just cut off the rounded part.
Right. And you can see it's really about the same size as the Neuland.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I have, you know, a whole range of them. The other thing I've done is I don't really like the holes on the Neulands, you know, and since it doesn't matter on a round nib, I've just covered it up with tennis racket tape. So I learned that from Kelvy, who does that so that her markers are easier to hold.
Yeah, nice. These are great hacks. Does anybody have questions for Amy or Tina about why they use them or how they use them? I love all these hacks, Amy. Thank you.
Amy, now that the call started, can you show that like gigantic round nib that you just got in the mail? I think
no, this is like same size as a Neuland. Do you call this number one or?
Yeah, it's the number one. So the number one comes in round, wedge, and art marker. Yep.
I just got this cool, it's a great idea. It's called I wouldn't recommend it because it's not water-based, but my son sent me this. It's called Air Ink, and it's also a round nib, but the ink is actually made from pollution that's pulled out of the air. And I just thought that was so novel. And the thing is, though, it's stinky since it's alcohol based.
Right.
It does have refills and stuff, but I'm sticking to this for my basic
for your work. And so can we go back to the poster that you had where you use the crink and you hack the Molotov?
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about this for just a second on how you actually used those markers, because I love how the terminals, the ends of each line are rounded. So that's literally a nice start and stop that you've done. You haven't gone back in and made them, I'm guessing, making them pretty. They naturally do that, right?
Right. You know, sometimes I'll do your double stroke, first stroke, double stroke with a brush marker, and then I'll actually go in and round the ends.
Right.
You told me once, maybe you just like round ends. And I thought, no, it's not that. And then I realized, yeah, it's that. I like round ends.
So where have you used the large crink mop and then the hacked Molotov?
I use them for titles occasionally, especially if I'm going to be working in architect's hand, which almost always dissolves if I'm working fast into just my regular hand. But especially when I'm working with design thinking teams or groups that are thinking about design, because architect's hand seems like a natural fit with that. You know, the concept goes with the font or the hand.
Yeah, exactly.
So I also used the hack Molotov on a whole wall that I did. It was a cement wall. So I wanted it just a little fatter, but I needed an acrylic, so that was how I did it.
That was that for the indoor golf project? So all the rules. Yeah. So people needed to be able to see it from far away and have it readable, and that was a great marker for that project. Right. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Does anybody have questions for Tina or Amy about how they use the round nibs or about their hacks? All right. Thank you, Tina and Amy. Okay, I am going to spotlight my hands again real quick so you can see and go through some of the different lettering styles that I use when using the round nib. And I have to thank Amy and Tina because for a very, very long time, I got rid of all of my round nibs, didn't like them, didn't like how uninteresting the line was. And it wasn't until about a year ago that they kind of ganged up on me a little bit. And I was like, okay, hold on. I need to give it another chance. And I started to really focus on Roman majuscules. And so those are the uppercase Roman. And in the chat room or in the chat right now, I'm giving you a link for the full Roman download. And what that means is if you go to Unlock Your Neuland Markers, you're going to get a download that looks like this. However, if you use this particular link to the download, you're not only going to get this template, which I highly recommend using to practice on, but you're also going to get different sizes so that you can use the fine one and the sketch one. So if you are sketchnoting, or if you're a bullet journal person, then the smaller form is really going to help you. Now, I always say practice large and then go small because it's going to look better, but sometimes we need to be able to practice at that small piece too. All right, it sounds like Tina wanted to give a shout out to the lettering with the masters, the very first artist. Yes, she did have a wonderful monoline style, and so Love Letters for Everybody is her handle on Instagram, and her name is Corrina. So she was actually using a brush nib marker, but it would look beautiful as a round nib as well. And so with this Roman majuscules, the reason why I ask you to use this particular template is because of the grid that the letters lay on. So if you'll notice, we have a square with a circle inside of it, then diagonals, and then those uprights are where the diagonals hit the circles. And all of the letters live on top of this grid. So we're not really going to use Roman majuscules when we're graphic recording because it's a very slow hand. But if you're having trouble with your handwriting or want to improve, this particular lettering style is very helpful when you want to do that. And so I'm just going to be using my number one so that you can really see this. And you'll notice that on the left of each one of these, you're going to see the letters that go inside of these. So we have some letters that are full, meaning it's 1 inch wide, 1 inch tall. The second row is actually 3/4, and then this third row is actually half, and then the M and the W actually go beyond that size, and so they go a little bit bigger. And knowing the widths of these letters are really going to help you when you're planning out your lettering so that you know how long are things. And so if you notice with my O and my Q, I'm just going over the actual circle. You can do whatever you'd like with the tail. When I get to the C, and here's where things get really important. If you have if you go to Neuland.com/hand lettering, you can download 4 exemplars. And the first exemplar is my actual letters on top of the grid so that you can see where things live. Okay. And so you'll notice that with the C and the G, yes, it follows the line, but it's slightly above the circle. And things like the A, the crossbar is slightly below the where all of these diagonal lines come together. The H is in the middle. And I'm going to skip some of the letters just because you can always go to unlock your Neuland markers, but I do want to show you the difference between the B, the R, and the P. And we're going to start with the inside line here, the inside upright, to do our downstroke. And when I do the B, I'm really following the circle at the top. And then I'm going to go use this same center part where it's really the juncture where 2 or more lines come together. And I'm going to go on the outside of the circle so that it has a little bit more of a counter space on the bottom. And this juncture is happening right at the middle. When we do the R, we're going to use the upright in the same place. We're actually going to follow the circle, but go a little bit below, and then draw an imaginary line for this leg. And then when we create the P, we're going to go a little bit lower. And so the B is going to be a little bit higher than the center. The R is going to be about the center and a little bit lower. And the P is going to be a little bit lower than that. And I know that's super, super like detailed. We're never going to do that when we're graphic recording, but knowing those details are going to help improve our lettering styles. And so, and I'll just do the W and the M because we've got a V here. And we know that the V starts on that inside upright on both sides. And then we just repeat that again with the intention of making all of these counter spaces equal. And when we create that M, we are actually going on the top of that inside bar to the outside of the square, drawing a V again, And you'll notice I'm working pretty slowly, and still my work isn't totally perfect. But if you go through and either use a round nib marker or a pencil or a sketch one, just to get these forms, you're going to start learning them much faster. And this is very slow, but it's going to improve your lettering and your legibility much, much better. So again, just really focusing on the grid and where things live in relationship to it. Okay, any questions about for Roman hand? So just want to, again, if you go to Neuland.com/hand lettering, there's an 8-page download. Notice that the first 4 pages are in English, the second 4 pages are in German. And they do print out to A4 or A3 size, or what's called 11 by 17. And I did it this size because I wanted you to see how big my letters were in actual size. So you didn't have to try to make that translation. And at the bottom of each exemplar, I actually show all of the markers and I circle which ones I would suggest using for that particular lettering style. So then the second download is double stroke first stroke, and this is the fastest way to make a lettering style bold. You can literally do that with any marker, but I'm just showing that I'm using the art marker in this case. And then there's an alphabet lettering style that's all brush marker, and I'll be covering this in a couple of weeks, and I'm going to be providing people with a new practice pages that is not available on Neuland's website yet, but hopefully we're going to redo some of these exemplars as well. And then the final one is Neuland hand, and that's when you're using the broad edge of the larger markers. And again, we'll cover this in a couple of weeks as well. But I also wanted to talk about some of the other lettering styles that you can use besides Neuland hand when you're using your monoline or your round nib marker. So Tina had mentioned a couple of people. I love it. You kind of stole my thunder. I love this because we learned Uncial hand, which the top here is Carol DuBosch's, not mine. Mine is below when I was practicing along with the class. And so she has a wonderful exemplar of Uncial hand, and she teaches us how to use, actually when she teaches you how to use monoline first, and then how to introduce the broad edge or the wedge nib. And so she showed us how to use this using our number ones and our fine one rounds. And then we went on to do this actually with the big ones, which look nice. And then also Sharon Zeugin, she was also lettering with the masters, fantastic visual practitioner, graphic recorder. She was showing us italic, but also really about how do you find your rhythm while you're working. And we started out using the round nib markers, but you can always use the brush nib and other markers as well. And so if you're interested in lettering with the masters, you can purchase these single sessions on Gumroad, on my Gumroad page. It's gumroad.com/corp graffiti art, or you can go to letslettertogether.com and purchase the entire year. And those are 2 wonderful wonderful sessions that will really help level up your lettering. And then a couple of other things that as I was going through my studio, I was trying to find, okay, where are some other instances where I've used the round nib, but to create a more emphasized lettering style. And so this is a handout that I give out when I teach chalkboard lettering. And it's one way to use a monoline marker just to create lines and then create fills. And you can do all kinds of interesting alternative fills and serifs, both in sort of a print version, but also this is sort of a faux calligraphy or faux brush lettering look. And so again, this is a free download. Feel free to email me, or I can even make this available along with the video, because this one's a pretty easy one. And what I've done here actually is I just drew the top one just by hand with the monoline, but with the one on the bottom, I actually used a brush marker to create the forms, and then I scanned that onto my iPad, and then I just outlined it on my iPad so that I would have good form for these particular letters. So we have a couple of questions here that I want to go back into the chat. Yes, so yes, Gray, that this other lettering style does remind you of tattoos. It would be a little bit more tattoo if it maybe had little spurs along the sides or something like that. I'm glad that you were able to take the lettering with the master's class. Okay, have a question regarding my stroke. I always like how straight your lines are. How do you do this? Honestly, my lines are not that straight. I have to be honest. I had to really, really focus, but these are not that straight. There are some wonderful graphic recorders out there that have very straight lines. I tend to have more expression and curves in mine. If you're talking about writing in a straight line, that is because I use practice paper that has lines, and you can purchase probably any kind of flip chart paper or make your own. I made my own lined paper for a long time, but then I helped modify and redesign the hand lettering to-go pad and the hand lettering learning pad that's flip chart size, and I'll show you the cover of this. There might be some writing on the front. Nope. Okay, so this is your hand lettering learning pad. It comes both in flip chart size and to-go size. And this to-go size is just a A4 bound size, and I use it all the time. And I suggest using this because it gives you the lines, at least the baseline to write your letters. And as visual practitioners, we have this superpower that we can visualize. And so if we build the muscle memory of drawing in a straight horizontal line, then we can visualize that when it comes to getting up to the wall. And I completely understand if it doesn't always happen live, it doesn't always happen to me live, but I can at least practice and feel better about that. What was the Neuland link for the other exemplars? Yes, if you go to www.neuland.com/hand lettering, you can download 4 free exemplars. And if you want the videos to go along with these exemplars, if you go to letslettertogether.com and click on Unlock Your Neuland Markers, you can find step-by-step videos. And I will be updating those videos this summer, but go ahead and practice with that, and then you'll see the next version as well. So yes, Tina's saying that the round nib is great for drawings. So these also work well imported into a layer of Procreate for lettering practice on the iPad. Yes, great, absolutely. I highly suggest using my downloads on your iPad to practice as well. All right, so any more questions, feel free to unmute yourself or put those in the chat room. Now, Amy did mention how to write like an architect, and I'm going to cover that next week in the Lettering Tips Tuesday. However, it's only going to be available for those who are who have subscribed to How to Write Like an Architect. It's going to be a bonus video. So we're going to go a little bit deeper. I'm going to talk about scaling and some other things. So please check that out. All right, great question from Christian. She's saying, she's saying, my stroke is done with a lot of determination, and I always seem to know where to start and where to end the stroke. Is this just practice? Yes, and. So I believe that it's important that we don't just do rote practice. So don't write the same letter over and over and over again if you're not getting it, because you'll actually create bad muscle memory. But you'll hear me say a lot in my classes that it's important to be very confident with your starts and stops. So regardless of what marker that you're using, I teach this a lot when I'm doing how to letter like a sign painter, because a lot of times our brush marker can get out of hand, but it's important that your starts and stops are very confident and purposeful. So when you're writing, and I know I'm going very slow here, and you have to go much slower when you go around curves, but even when I'm going very fast, I don't let my hand or my wrist just sort of fly away. So you're not going to see a lot of these kind of marks coming from me where they're just sort of thin and thick. That happens when we're using our fingers and our wrists and we're starting to draw before our marker hits the page, and then the marker leaves the page. So that's really important. So be very determined with your starts and stops. So the first thing to do is really understand form, and then visualize that form as you write. And as you write, think about the relationships of letters and how they come together. Now you'll notice that I'm writing architect hand pretty quickly, and I'm playing with a little bit of a bounce, because we know in architect these letters all also go up into the left, up into the right, so that we're ready to write the next letter. It makes it a much faster. So Oh, great question for Amy. This is from Gray. He tried to hack a number 1, but it ended up ruining it. Are there things you should watch out for trying to hack from Amy? Amy, do you mind answering that question? You need to unmute yourself.
Yep. Heather, you're the one who taught me how to hack a marker with a sharp knife and a bold stroke, right?
Yeah. That's right. Okay. I'll take you off spotlight now. No pressure. But what about hacking a round one? Do you have any tips for that?
Same thing, just sharp knife. I actually don't find the need to hack this one. But I imagine you could. I should try it because then I'd get a fatter end. But I don't know how well, honestly, these ones behave once you've cut them. So
right.
it's worth a try. I mean, it's one nib that you reckon.
Exactly.
Just make sure it's a sharp knife and you do a single cut.
That's right. And I think that you also have to be thinking about where does it curve, right? And so you're going to want to make sure that it stays as flat as possible. And the reason why you want to use a sharp knife, of course, is so that you've got one fell swoop. If you start to go back and forth, what happens is that there's this very thin veneer that's around the actual nib. And if you rough that up, then what'll happen is it'll almost turn into a brush, and not like our nice brush tip, but it'll get really frayed and it won't be as clean. So try that out, and also know that you can buy refillable nibs. And so here are some of the nib refills along with their item numbers if you're interested. This big white one, this is for the number 1, and I'll show how to refill that in just a minute. This is for the fine one color. Notice that it's a dark brown. And then this is a fine one outliner marker. So the outliner markers take this whiter looking nib as well. So a few more questions back in the chat room. You like using brush marker for drawings, but requires some technique and handle thickness. That's right. And so with the brush marker, which I'll be covering in a few weeks, we do have this nice variation in line, and you can get a much more consistent line using the round nib. And then Antonio, thank you. Yes, determination is key for lettering and drawings. Practice focused on repetition and consistency have been issues to work on currently. Yeah, consistency is an issue. Yep. Good. Do you hack it dry? Yes, you absolutely hack any marker nib dry. If not, you're going to have quite a mess. So I do recommend hacking it dry. And I don't teach that in any of my online courses, because especially one-to-one like this, or when I'm watching people, because I don't want to see somebody hack their finger off. So I do teach that in my in-person classes. Yeah. So let's see. Let me check out my agenda. What else we need to cover? All right, so I'm going to go ahead and change around marker nib so that you can see what that looks like. And some people use scissors, some people use pliers. Sometimes I just use a paper towel. Honestly, I just use my fingers and a paper towel. And yes, it can get messy, but I don't mind the mess. Some people don't like the mess, and I understand that. So I will show you how I'm going to take this one apart, and I will try it with my fingers, but I don't always have a lot of luck with the round ones because they taper. So sometimes I will just take the edge of my scissors here, make a little grab into it a little bit, and start to pull. There we go. And if I had a pair of pliers, this would be much easier. And so a couple of things. Notice that the nib is damaged on this side, of course, because I pulled it out, but this side is still good. And if you can turn this around without damaging the nib, meaning you're not going to shove it down here to get it way in there, but if you can use your fingers or a paper towel to kind of push it in without damaging the tip, you can reuse, you can use a marker nib twice. And so that's no problem. So there's my new side. And when it comes to doing a fine one, there's a different technique that I use to exchange the nib. So what I do is, this one's not too bad, but I didn't have any that were still good. So what I'll do is I'll take the top off, And this is my good side because I haven't flipped this over before, and you should be able to tell by looking at it. So this side is really nice. So I don't care about this side if it gets damaged. So I'm going to go ahead and push it down and push it through this way, pull it out, and then, because this is the damaged side, I'm going to flip this through here because this is the new good side, and I can push it down again over here. And I don't want to go out too far, just enough so that the nib comes out and makes contact with this, with the ink reservoir. So this little ink reservoir is, it's like cotton or some kind of a material that has a coating around it. It's almost like a plastic coating that keeps the ink on the inside there. So when you refill these, you want to make sure you go slowly so all the ink goes down the middle. And so that's how you replace a round nib. Well, and I didn't even need the new one here.
Hey, Heather?
Yeah.
As long as you've got that marker open, you might want to show people how to refill those fine ones, because
Oh, yeah.
when I started,
Oh,
I
that's
started
right.
at the end.
That's right. Sometimes that can be a real challenge. Let's see if I can find ink for it. I may not have ink.
Heather.
Yes.
No, I have a comment on what Amy said. I also had a problem because I searched online and there's only the way to charge the art markers, but not the fine one. Then I found it, I think, on a German link from Royland, that it's not anywhere. So
Oh.
I can confirm what she says.
Oh, you're saying that there's no instruction anywhere on how to fill a fine one? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think that the only instruction is on the manual, on the little manual when you buy the ink.
Oh,
you have a small instruction that says, yeah.
Yeah,
That's the only instruction online. There's not any video.
Okay, I'll let Neuland know that, because if you go to Neuland's website, they're starting sort of a Wikipedia. It's called Markerpedia site, and they can put things on there. I've shown this several times in some of my free videos, but you'd have to know where it is to search for it, so I understand. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this. It's 200 with my 200 ink, and I'm taking the top off. I'm going to try. Sometimes I don't have very good hand strength. So taking that top off, and I'm just going to drop the ink right inside, and I'm going to go slowly. It's just going to be a few drops at a time. If you find that the ink tries to get way up here, that means that it's also going down the sides of your marker, and it could end up drying, and it's not really going to hurt anything, but you're just wasting ink. So you can just put a few drops here, and this isn't completely dry, so I'm not going to add too much ink to it, because for a fine one, if it is completely dry, it only takes about a half of a refill bottle full. So was that helpful? Okay, it looks like we have some more questions in the chat. Can you change a brush fine one into a monoline with that technique? Are you referring to just flipping it over, or help me out with that one? That was from Gray. I'm going to see if I can find a...
I was actually thinking of the idea, if I like order some monoline nibs, I have a whole bunch of fine ones. They're all brushes. I'm just wondering if I just bought some monoline nibs, if I could just change one of those brushes into a monoline.
That's an excellent question, and I don't have the answer to that because I haven't tried that. So I would say, if you can try it.
Homework.
There you go. You have homework, and then let us know. And yeah,
okay.
I can't guarantee that, but I don't see why not. I can tell you that I've had outliner pens like this that I've put the brush nib, the fine one brush nib in. So I don't see why it wouldn't work the other way around. Yep. Because for a little while there, they didn't have them in stock, and I wanted a brush marker. A lot of people, and I found this in Europe to be true too, a lot of visual practitioners, especially sketchnoters and illustrators, like this particular marker with the brush nib because it can get really fine lines as they draw. What if the marker...
That's what I use it for.
Yeah, exactly. So Chantel is asking, what if the marker is dried out? Can you reuse it? That's an excellent question. If the marker is completely dried out and that's one of the water-based markers, meaning not the outliner, absolutely. You can just put new ink in it and it should go right through. Now with the outliner, I've had some of these outliner markers for as long as 8-9 years, and I've only had 2 dry out completely. And they've happened more recently because I've been I've been accumulating more markers, so I don't use them as often. And so what I would suggest is keep your outliners with ink in them as often as possible. If you find one that's completely dried out, just replace the nib. Do that first, and then put the ink through the back. And if for some reason it doesn't travel to the nib, it means that it's dried up in the center somewhere. And if that's the case, then what I've done in the past is I've just put a new nib in it, and I've inked the nib, and inked it from this side, meaning I'm literally just slowly putting ink on the nib, and that's helped me keep my markers last. I had one that lasted 2 more years after that. So it takes a little bit of care, and you mark it. In this case, I just marked this one because it was a round nib. I usually put my own little sticker on it because I'll confuse it too easily with the wedge nib. But I love Amy's idea of putting a white circle around up here to help you remember that it's a round nib so you can see it from the top. So another question, can you use other inks? I would say if you are using the empty marker, then I would say you can put all kinds of inks in here. And my rule about ink, whether you're using the empty marker or something like a brush, an aquash marker, many of you have seen these. A lot of people use this for watercolor, but you can put Neuland ink in these, and you can also put any kind of fountain pen ink. So if you have a fountain pen ink, it will go through this little, there's like a little filter here. It will also go through the little piece of filament that's in the Neuland markers. Now, they can't guarantee what happens if you put a different kind of ink in it, but I use all different kinds of inks all the time in my refillable markers just because I like to try different colors. So that's an excellent question. Thanks for asking it. Welcome, Lisa. You've been throwing your fine ones out and just replacing them. Yep, a lot of people don't know that because they see a little thing on the end here and they're like, well, I can't get my nib in there. But yeah, you can just refill them from the top. So glad you won't have to be throwing any more of those away. Wonderful. Thank you, Christian, for sharing the PDF of the resource describing how to refill the fine ones. Yep, she's saying page 2, right bottom. And actually, I keep saying Christian is a she. I don't know if that's true because I can't see your pictures. So I apologize. Thank you, Christian. Outliner, Tina's saying outliner 1 millimeter and fine one round is 0.8 millimeter. Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. That is a slight switch. So this is a great question for Neuland, and I will ask my ambassador contact as well that question because that's a good one. Yep. So Amy just tried it out. Seems to work. Good. Awesome. Yes. So Chantel is saying that sometimes these fine ones can unscrew themselves, and that can be true. It certainly can happen. I've never had one completely unscrew, but I can see where it could partially unscrew and then air could get in there and draw. So thank you, Christian. I'm very happy to know that you're a man. Sorry for confusing that before. Great question. How about asking Neuland to create a water-based crink that is more economical than crinks are? Well, I have a little secret for you. I bought a whole bunch of mops that actually look like the same body as crink. And so since you brought it up, I'll just throw some Neuland ink in that and sometime in the next couple of weeks, and I'll get back to you and see if it works. I have a feeling that because of the ink that comes out of crink is actually acrylic based, that it may not be the same. And I'm going to spotlight my picture here. It may not be the same, like it's going to be way, way too watery. So just know that a lot of times the reason why it's called a mop is because it's pretty sloppy. And when you put it on the wall and you press it, ink will literally drip. So now that I know that, you could probably put Neuland's acrylic, high flow acrylic in it. So I'm going to try that out and let you know. And then the answer would be, I don't think that they would need to make a new product. I think you just need to buy empty mops and put their acrylic ink in it, but I'll check that out. All right, so Antonio, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question on pressure.
Yeah, hey. My question was an observation. So I have seen, sorry, from.
Uh-oh, I lost you.
On the, sorry. Okay. I caught myself. Someone was calling me. Sorry.
Okay.
The phone. My question was on pressure. I see that you put a lot of pressure on the marker. So the question is, you have to exert the same amount of pressure on all the pens? Because I see that also the termination has to rely on pressure. I've had some problems regarding the thickness and so, but I think when you use a lot of pressure or you apply amount of pressure, even the the pen sounds, the drawing or the lettering turns to be a lot better. What's your opinion in general about pressure or recommendation?
Yes.
Advice?
No worries. So I definitely am very, very heavy handed. I use the back of my hand and it's on the paper as I draw. And in the very beginning, I stopped using round nib markers because by the end of the day, my round nib markers look like wedge nib. They had a nice dent in them. And so what I find is that when I'm working, if I'm graphic recording, I just keep working. And yeah, my lines will tend to get thicker and thicker throughout the day. What I also do, and I think I learned this from Amy, is that when I start a gig, if I have a whole bunch of round ones, especially the fine ones, because they tend to get kind of flat or fat or worn down a lot faster, is I will mark them which ones are new, because those the new ones will have a nice thin line, and that one's definitely new and thin, and then some of the older ones will be slightly thicker. Now this is not that big of a deal. I really don't mind, but if I'm having a couple of them and I have a few in my hand and I'm using them interchangeably because they tend to dry out a little bit as I work, then I will just use the new ones, or I'll just use the used ones so that the line is a similar width. Does that help answer the question?
Yeah, pretty much. I was trying to figure out if the pressure is also a factor in how the lettering turns out, because I've had, as I tell you, some problems. For instance, when using the art marker, I think you have to exert some good amount of pressure so the lettering comes out nicely.
Yeah.
But in the other ones, brush nib or the other less thicker, it's not that necessary. As you say, the more important thing is that you put your hand on the board and just be stable.
Yeah, exactly, because you want to be able to have some kind of contact with the board so you know where you are in relationship to it, right? And
so the relation of pressure, sorry, yeah, just to finish it, the relation of pressure, it pretty much depends on the type of the tip, type of tip or art marker, it depends.
Yeah, it really does, because we're using these markers at different angles. Now for the round one, if you find that you've really edged it, like put an edge on it because it's too thick, you can easily turn it over and start writing with it again, and it'll start to thin out. And I have in the past, if I had to make one long piece that I knew I was using a round nib marker for, I will literally write a couple of words, turn it a quarter of an inch, write a couple words, turn it a quarter of an inch. If I was doing something really long, like objectives or something like that, and I wanted them all to be the same, that's getting really specific though. But when it comes to something like the brush marker, and I will cover this in a few weeks, yes, pressure is everything. You've got anywhere from a line like that to a line like that. Now, how do you control that? And how you are, your relationship to what you have on the page is really important. And also the condition of your nib, because some of these nibs can wear out. So I think it all comes down to pressure can affect the condition of your nib, and the condition of your nib can affect your line quality.
Hey, Heather.
Yeah.
So one advantage of wrapping the round nib, I actually put a little piece of fabric in the holes and then wrap it. Then you're not holding it the same way. Every time you pick it up, it's slightly different. So
that's right. So you're not putting that dent in it from the same direction. That's awesome. That's great. Okay. All right. What other questions do people have?
Go ahead and unpin me, Heather.
I know. I'm sorry. I can't find you now to unpin you. I love that so many people are coming into these calls. All right. Should see everybody now. All right. Any other questions?
Can I offer a little comment on how I refill my outliner?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like a yes and, so I do unscrew it like this, but instead of pulling this out and keeping everything in.
Okay, hold it up so we can see it.
Oh, sorry.
Yep.
So it's still screwed on. When I go to unscrew it, I press slightly against the edge, pull this out, and then I hold my fingers on it before I put the ink in. So then I don't get it on the outside edges, because one time I didn't do that, and it started to kind of come back out of the shaft of the marker. So I just kind of pull it up a little bit.
That's awesome.
It gives me more control to get that ink right on the tip. Then I can push this back down. And then, yeah, one time it just started to spill back out over here, and it was not bad. So
that's excellent. Yeah. So that little plastic thing that goes around the outside is helpful in keeping that ink in. So might as well use it for what it's used for, right? Cool. All right. Anybody else? Any other questions about the round nibs? I know it seems pretty simple, but I think that your form is the most important. So what do I mean by that? If you're working and you don't connect your letters, and so I'll pin this really quick so you can see it. If you're not connecting your strokes, or if your strokes are really crossing over, it makes it less readable. And so again, those very purposeful starts and stops are going to be very important in making your lettering as legible as possible. Good. It's not so simple. I make it seem simple. Well, yeah, I make it simple. I try to simplify it, but I've also been doing it for a while too. But don't get overwhelmed by how long I've been doing it. I've only been doing this and practicing lettering and things like that for about 3 or 4 years. So question from Chantel. I just started practicing a consistent hand. Did you say just writing 1,000 for example P's is not the way to go? How to do it right? Use the practice form templates with the circles. So yes, my first suggestion is that you definitely use these particular templates when you're practicing. And I say that if you start writing a letter, say that I wrote my A and it was sort of like this, and then it was like this, and then it was like this, and I wasn't getting it. There's 2 things you need to do. You need to go back and you need to look at the form of the letter. So go back to an exemplar, see what is the proper form, see how it lives in relationship to that. The second thing to do, regardless if you're using Neuland or Roman hand or any other lettering style, is if you're not getting it after 3 letters, then you need to slow down. Sometimes we try to go faster trying to fix it, and it doesn't fix it. So go back and look at the form, slow down, and once you have the letters, so my suggestion for practice is fill out one of these and then start writing words. Write your name, write other people's names, write a pangram, but stop doing the practice. So because for a couple of reasons, you could build bad muscle memory. It's boring, and letters don't have meaning until they live in relationship to one another, and they can slightly change once they are written in relationship to one another. So when I talk about consistency, I'm not trying to fill up an entire page full of letters. I don't know why anybody would do that or why that's taught. It's not the way I was taught from master calligraphers or sign painters. So just you can literally, if you really, really focus, visualize, and train your hand, you will be able to get pretty close to perfect. Now go write some words. Okay? Excellent. Yes, so Antonio, process over product. Yep. If you write words and phrases for friends, it works both as marketing tool and motivation to practice. Absolutely. So when possible, make your practice sessions practical, right? So go ahead and once you learn a lettering style, go make a flip chart that you can use in your next meeting or create a sketch note with it. Make sure that you put it to practice as soon as possible. Yep, Tina would trace the exemplar the first few times, then try the lettering to go pad. That's great. And again, for Roman hand, really you can just use this and then be done. Move on to a new lettering style. This is just so that you have that skeleton lettering style to improve on other lettering styles. So many other lettering styles are based on Roman hand. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you a quick sneak peek of my book, which we're having we are having a virtual launch party on June 27th. And in the very first chapter, which I call Brick, and it's a slab serif lettering style, I go over the importance of Roman hand. And there's several hands, there's scripts or lettering styles in this book that are based on Roman hand. And so just know that by learning Roman hand, now you can now apply it to other lettering styles. So it's really there not to perfect. Know that many calligraphers learn and go back to Roman hand over and over and over again. Yes, Raffalina, she talks about visualizing the letters before you go to sleep. Yes. So here is what Carol DuBosch has told me. She said, imagine these grids. So imagine these grids and imagine them on the inside of your eyelids. And then, because you've already practiced drawing them, imagine what those letters look like on top of that grid. And so if you go to sleep at night, before you fall asleep, go ahead and start practicing your letters in that way. Imagine what they look like over, maybe even what the line would look like once it's drawn. All right. Yep. Good. Great. Great insights, Antonio. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. I hope you all take a look at my book. I'll be sharing more information on June 27th. I want to remind you that next week we will be meeting and talking about how to write like an architect, and I do talk about the different types of materials and the different tools that you can use to write like an architect, but I'm also going to go over some of the variations, answer a lot of questions for those who are on the call, and be sure to tune in actually a week from this Friday on June 21st. This hasn't officially been announced, but you've heard it here first. I will be hosting a series of digital scribing sessions this summer, and there's several people who have raised their hands, professionals in the field that are using digital as scribing. I don't pretend to be an expert, so I'm going to host a bunch of them. It's going to be through the IFEP, so the live calls will be free and open to the public, and then the recordings will be available on the IFEP website for members. So Gray was asking what time on the 27th. Well, we haven't decided exactly on the time, but I will tell you that we will be having videos that we're going to be running on one of Neuland's social media channels. We haven't decided yet, but we'll be running videos all day of different practicing methods, of me interviewing people who have contributed to the book. We have several contributors to my book, and we will go live. It'll probably be in the US, it'll probably be around noon or so, because we want to be able to capture the European audience as well. Okay, any other questions? Okay, you're welcome to unmute yourself. So glad you were all able to tune in. And yeah, I look forward to lettering with you next Tuesday, and I'll see you online. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, Heather. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Great to see you, Allison.